Let's be real here. I've never been on a track. I'm not Chris Harris on cars. This is not the Motor Trend channel. But let's also be realistic here. Most owners of Ford Mustangs have probably never been on a track either. Now, given that this is the most powerful car that I've ever driven, a 2015 Ford Mustang GT 6-speed manual, it's important to note that this vehicle probably exceeds the capabilities of most typical drivers of Mustangs, or that they'll ever need on a city or public road. So given that it's not particularly practical either, I mean, we all know that, it kind of begs the question, why buy it? Well, thanks for finding me out here on the old interwebs. My name is Greg Kavanaugh, and this is my amateur car review channel, Gallup Journey Test Drives. And you know, all the haters and all the fanboys alike, hear me out for the next few minutes. You can complain at the end. It's a terribly windy day here in Gallup, New Mexico, so I am going to do all of my dialogue from here within this little Batmobile cocoon that is the Mustang GT. Now, when it comes to the Mustang GT, it doesn't make a lot of sense to evaluate it based on its practical, everyday application. Because the reality is, and everybody knows this, it's just really not that great for it. You have a lot better options, pretty much most things. It's hard to get in and out of, the roof line's low, you know how it goes. But we all know that's not why you buy a Mustang. So I'm not going to show you all the space in the trunk or in the back seat, because no one cares about that, I don't think. The reason you buy a Mustang or a Camaro or a Challenger or whatever it may be is for something that's not necessarily quantifiable, and that's the experience. And that boils down to kind of two key areas with the Mustang. Firstly, styling and aesthetics, but more importantly, driving dynamics. So let's evaluate it basically on those two key ideas. So let's get the bad number out of the way, the bad numbers. 15 city, 25 highway, 19 combined. Those are full-size truck numbers, ladies and gentlemen. So you don't buy a Mustang GT for fuel economy, and as you can see, that's not going to be something you're going to get a lot of. The 5-liter V8 here, the Coyote, is more than enough for, I would say, the vast majority of drivers. This is the fastest car I've ever driven. 0 to 60, and I think most people do like 4.5 or so, and it can run the quarter mile in probably 13-ish. So I mean, those are terribly fast numbers. You know, those were supercar numbers not that long ago, and here you can buy that now and get that in a Mustang. 435 horsepower at 6,500 RPM, 400 pound-feet of torque at just over 4,000 RPM. So it doesn't quite have the turbo shove people have been starting to get used to, or I've been getting used to in various cars I've driven, you know, where the torque really hits you right away down low. You got to rev it. But that's a good thing. And at 400 pound-feet, I mean, there's more than enough torque here, don't get me wrong, but it is a more traditional power curve, and that makes it really enjoyable, actually, because you get to wring it out and row it through the gears. Now, I would argue, though, that if you want the Ford Mustang experience, but you don't necessarily need this kind of performance, the EcoBoost might give you everything you need to have that experience without the capabilities of the GT and that fuel economy price. So I'm hoping to drive the EcoBoost at some point and see kind of how that feels. Because the reality I noticed is, if I were to own this car, I'd probably get a ticket within the first week, and that ticket would not be for 5 or 6 miles an hour over the speed limit. That's just the reality. When you drive a car like this, you want to drive it fast, and there's not a lot of places you can do that. So that kind of begs the point that people who drive Mustang GT should consider going to track days and seeing what this thing can really do. Now, of course, the big news for this new Mustang, this new evolution of the Mustang, is the independent rear suspension. Now, I can attest to that, to the real core attributes and why that is a good thing. I have driven plenty of previous generation live axle Mustangs, and you know, the roads around here in New Mexico are not good, and it'll scare you. The old Mustang GT with the live axle, I remember specifically getting ready to pull onto the highway and turning onto the on-ramp. It was pretty bumpy, and I was getting on the power, and yeah, you know, the back end stepped out. Now, I was plenty comfortable with it, but the reality is here, this independent rear suspension does a much better job of handling bumps and bad pavement while still putting the power down, and that's a huge step forward. So kudos to Ford for going finally with the IRS, because it makes a huge difference in this car. Even a non-track star like myself can notice that. Now, the Mustang comes with some pretty cool features. Here in the center console, you have a mode switch that allows you to switch between sport, normal, track, and or sport plus, I guess they call it, and snow and wet. So that's pretty cool. It kind of changes the dynamics of the car in terms of throttle and so forth, and many of those types of things. I just went to snow there and I could feel the throttle get lazy. You also have a control for the steering, which is normal and sport and comfort. And you can also feel that too. When you switch to comfort, it's a little bit lighter. It feels a little sloppier, frankly. So I didn't drive it in comfort. I drove it in sport all the time. But you do have some controls there, which do change the dynamics and the feel of the car. They're not just labels that you don't notice. So that's pretty cool. Now, the Ford does have the My Key, which is really cool. So if you're a dad and you want to buy the Mustang GT and you really want to get this performance package and take advantage of that, but then you want to let your 17-year-old son take it to prom, you can have a key that specifically limits how fast he can go and all those kinds of things. That's a really cool feature that Ford is doing, and it makes a lot of sense, especially on something like a Mustang GT. And I see other manufacturers are following suit as well. They're trying to give parents and stuff some kind of control of what's happening in their vehicles when other people are driving them. So that is really nice. So let's talk styling. There's no doubt here that you pay to have these proportions, but what nice proportions they are. This is a good looking car, particularly in the exterior. You know, it's a low roof line. It's clearly a coupe. It's not easy to get in and out of. But yeah, the trade-off is the way it looks on the outside. The first thing you'll notice, especially in person, I think it's a little less obvious in video or on paper, is that this thing has a waist. It's got hips in the back, and that's a good thing. It's sexy. It gives it quite the stance. It's kind of looks like it's on the prowl a little bit. It's really nice. The deck lid, the sloping kind of fastback looking roof line, even though it's not a hatchback. These all add up to just a good looking car. There's one particular angle, which is kind of the direct side profile, where you kind of notice that the front end, the overhang seems a little long and the hood is a little bit tall. Kind of throws off the proportions, and I'm sure that's probably for safety regulations. But other than that, I mean, when you're not looking at that side profile, the front end is very menacing. It's got that cool kind of chin spoiler on it. The 5.0 badges on the side. This one is sitting on all-season tires, Pirelli P0s, which I thought was kind of interesting because, now granted, someone like myself probably isn't going to put the traction of those tires to the test. But the reality is, if you're buying a Mustang GT, you probably aren't planning to drive it in the snow a lot. So it kind of begs the question, why not just have summer tires on there and perhaps have a second set of snow tires if you really had to drive it in inclement weather? I think that would obviously aid the handling, and it would also make the car look a little bit better because the all-season sidewall is kind of tall. But it makes sense in some cases as well. So here on the interior, you again are paying the price for these proportions. You can see how close my head is to the ceiling here. And ergonomically, I kind of did have a hard time getting comfortable in this so that I could operate the clutch completely as well as still shift and have a decent arm's length here, even with a telescoping wheel. In fact, at 5'8", I'm a little bit short, and I actually think this car would feel a little bit better if I were actually a little bit taller, because then I could be moved back a little bit from the steering wheel and still be able to operate the pedals well for shifting. But the retro feel in here is cool. It looks good. It's definitely an upgrade from the last interior. The quality's pretty good. There's even like kind of a fake grain here on the metal. I don't know why metal would have grain, but it's cool, as if it was polished or whatever. They go with this kind of retro, almost aircraft style. You got the toggle switches here for various things, and they're kind of aircraft inspired. They're pretty cool. There's a mode switch here. Even the speedometer says ground speed, and the gauges are big and really make it clear what the intent of this vehicle is. Now, there are some cool little details too that they add. For instance, the mirrors project a little Mustang logo, lit up logo at night. So as you approach the car and it unlocks, that shines down onto the sidewalk. That's really cool. The climate control partially has some hard buttons, and the rest needs to be done on the screen, like for instance, choosing vents versus feed and defrost and stuff. I don't like that entirely. Defrost has its own button, but not the vents. This one has heated and cooled seats. It's got collision avoidance and so forth, a collision warning. I mean, those things definitely raise the price, but it's got some tech as well. There's not a lot of storage. There's a little bit in the door. There's a teeny little bit here, and then there's some here in the center armrest. But yeah, in terms of kind of keeping a little bit of stuff in the car, there's not a lot of choices. But those are the concessions you make for driving a sports coupe, and I think they're to basically be expected, but it's something worth noting. So the reality is, the Mustang fanboys have a lot to be happy about with this new Mustang. I really like it. And all those Mustang haters, you have to admit, this is a pretty compelling package. Now, when it comes to price, when you check it versus its competition, the Camaro, the Challenger, and so forth, you'll see this kind of slots in very similarly to these cars. The GT here can come in kind of at a base price around $32,000, and then depending on options and stuff, it can go up from there. This one pushing almost $40K. So there's no doubt that buying a Mustang GT is not cheap. You're paying for a lot here, but you're also getting quite a bit of performance now for under $40,000. It's really quite impressive. So when cross-shopping it with its competition, the reality is you're not going to be necessarily looking at price. It's really going to boil down to the experience you want. And does the Ford, or the Batmobile as I like to call this one, give you the experience you're looking for? Or is that going to come from the Camaro and the Challenger? Again, most fanboys are going to stick with what they like. And those people in the middle, you need to test drive one to see what I'm feeling and experiencing right now. I want to give a big thanks to the people that make these test drives happen. In this case, it is Gurley Ford, the oldest Ford dealership in New Mexico. Check out their link in the description. And of course, a big thanks to you guys for watching, liking, subscribing, and sharing. And of course, I know the comments on this one will probably be good, so I look forward to reading those. See you next time. Cheers.